Billionaire dining at a luxury restaurant in Beverly Hills, until he met his ex and his baby. He turned. The floor tilted. Tim. Kristen's breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. 2 years compressed into the space of a heartbeat. Same jawline. Same way of holding himself, like the world was there to be managed, not experienced. He was scanning the dining room of Mastro's Beverly Hills, probably looking for the restroom or checking his phone, or doing whatever men like him did between courses at restaurants where appetizers cost $50. His gaze moved across the room, landed on her, held. She watched the recognition hit, saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, the phone lowering slowly from his line of sight. For a moment, just a moment, something crossed his face that looked almost like panic. Then it was gone, replaced by that smooth, professional mask she remembered too well. Ethan shifted in her arms, making that small sound babies make when they're getting tired. 6 months old. Those startling blue eyes, Tim's eyes, tracked the movement across the restaurant as the man who didn't know he was a father started walking toward them. 20 minutes earlier, the air conditioning at Mastro's Beverly Hills had that expensive hum, quiet enough to ignore until you noticed it, then impossible to unhear. Kristen shifted Ethan higher on her hip, the fabric of her borrowed dress pulling tight across her shoulders. The hostess had said 10 minutes. That was 17 minutes ago. She didn't belong here. The dress was Rachel's, her co-worker who'd insisted on this whole thing, who was currently in the restroom reapplying lipstick like they had all the time in the world. The heels pinched. The lighting was too warm, too soft, designed to make everyone look like they'd just returned from somewhere Mediterranean. Kristen felt the weight of every glance that slid past her, the kind of look that sized you up and dismissed you in the same breath. Ethan squirmed, his tiny fist grabbing at the neckline of her dress. Already opinionated about everything, she bounced him gently, that automatic movement every mother learns without realizing. His eyes tracked the crystal chandelier above them. Somewhere in the dining room, someone laughed too loud. The sound echoed off marble. "Sorry, sorry." Rachel appeared at her elbow, smelling like perfume that cost more than Kristen's monthly grocery budget. "Okay, they said our table's almost ready." "You said that 20 minutes ago." I know, but look at this place." Rachel gestured around like she was presenting evidence. "Totally worth it, right?" Kristen didn't answer. Her lower back was starting to ache from standing, and Ethan was getting that look. The one that meant he'd be crying in about 10 minutes if she didn't find somewhere to sit down. She'd left his diaper bag in Rachel's car because Rachel said it would ruin the vibe. The vibe. As if Kristen gave a damn about the vibe when her 6-month-old needed changing. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices and the waiters wore expressions of permanent discretion. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Wilshire. The traffic below reduced to silent streaks of red and white. Everyone here looked comfortable, confident, like they'd been born knowing which fork to use. Kristen adjusted Ethan again. His weight was familiar, grounding. At least he didn't care that her dress was borrowed or that her shoes were from Target. He just wanted her close, wanted that steady heartbeat he'd been listening to since before he knew what sound was. The hostess reappeared, tablet in hand. "Your table is ready." "Finally," Rachel muttered, already moving toward the dining room. Kristen followed, weaving between tables where conversations hummed at that particular volume rich people used, low enough to seem private, loud enough to make sure you knew they were there. The smell of seared meat and truffle oil hung in the air. Someone had ordered the bone marrow. She knew because the scent was unmistakable, rich and almost too much. They passed a table where a man sat alone, working his way through what looked like a ribeye. He had his phone propped against a water glass, probably checking emails between bites. Dark hair, expensive suit, the kind of posture that suggested complete control. Kristen's eyes slid past him without recognition. Not yet. The hostess led them to a booth near the back, mercifully away from the main traffic. Kristen slid in, settling Ethan on her lap. He immediately grabbed for the silverware. She moved it out of reach. He whined. She produced a teething ring from her purse, the one acceptable baby item Rachel had allowed. "See? Isn't this amazing?" Rachel was already studying the wine list, her eyes bright with the kind of excitement Kristen couldn't quite access anymore. Not since Ethan. Not since her life had narrowed to feedings and diaper changes, and trying to remember the last time she'd slept more than 4 hours straight. "It's nice," Kristen said, because it was easier than explaining that nice felt like a foreign country she'd visited once and could barely remember. "You need to get out more," Rachel said, not unkindly. "I mean, when's the last time you did something for yourself?" "I'm here, aren't I? You know what I mean." Kristen did know. Rachel meant dating, meeting people, reclaiming some version of herself that existed before late-night feedings and the constant low-level anxiety of keeping another human alive. But that version felt like someone else entirely. Someone who hadn't learned how to function on 3 hours of sleep. Someone who didn't have spit-up permanently embedded in at least one item of clothing at all times. Ethan started fussing. Kristen bounced him automatically, that rhythm she could do in her sleep and probably had. His little fingers found her necklace, a simple silver chain her mother had given her years ago. He pulled. She gently extracted it from his grip. He pulled again. "He's getting tired," Kristen said. "We just got here." "I know, but 10 minutes. Just give me 10 minutes of adult conversation before you go full mom mode." Kristen bit back the response that wanted to come. Full mom mode. Like it was something she could turn on and off, like she wasn't always, constantly, every single second aware of the small person depending on her for everything. She stood, Ethan on her hip. "I'm going to walk him around a bit. Maybe that'll calm him down." Rachel sighed but didn't argue. Kristen knew that sigh. The one that said, "I'm trying to help, and you won't let me." But help wasn't a night out at a restaurant where appetizers cost what she usually spent on a week's worth of groceries. Help was someone watching Ethan for 2 hours so she could sleep. Help was not having to explain why she couldn't just relax and enjoy herself. She moved toward the restrooms, past tables where people laughed and gestured and lived lives that looked easy from the outside. Ethan's head rested against her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. She could feel him starting to settle, that gradual relaxation that meant he might make it through dinner without a full meltdown. Near the entrance to the private dining area, she paused. There was a small seating area there, leather chairs arranged around a coffee table that probably cost more than her car. She could sit for a minute, just a minute. She sank into one of the chairs, Ethan still against her shoulder. The leather was butter soft, the kind that probably got more expensive the more you used it. Through the archway, she could see into the main dining room. The man who'd been eating alone was standing now, his back to her. Tall, dark suit that fit the way expensive suits did. He was looking at something on his phone, his posture suggesting the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about whether you belonged somewhere. That's when it happened. He turned. "Now. Kristen." His voice. Lower than she remembered. Or maybe she'd just forgotten. "Tim." Ethan chose that moment to lift his head. Those blue eyes, Tim's eyes, turning toward the sound of a new voice, curious, unafraid. 6 months old and already braver than his mother. Tim's gaze dropped to the baby, then back to her face, then to the baby again. The silence stretched thin. "I didn't know you were in LA, he said finally. The words sounded rehearsed, safe. "I live here." "Right, of course." Another pause. Somewhere in the dining room, a glass shattered. Polite laughter followed. Ethan's fingers found Kristen's necklace again. She didn't move to stop him. "Is that?" Tim started, stopped. His throat worked. "How old?" 6 months. She watched him do the math, watched the moment it clicked, watched something that might have been fear or anger or recognition flicker across his face before the mask slammed back into place. "Congratulations," he said, flat, empty. Kristen felt the familiar anger rise, the same anger she'd swallowed 2 years ago when he'd called her a liar, when he'd suggested she was trying to trap him, when he'd made it clear that believing her was too much to ask. "Thanks," she said, just as flat. Tim's hand moved toward his pocket, stopped, fell back to his side. His eyes kept returning to Ethan, quick glances like he couldn't help himself. The baby stared back, unblinking, interested. I should... Kristen gestured vaguely toward the dining room. Yeah, of course. Neither of them moved. You look good, Tim said suddenly, like the words had escaped without permission. I looked tired. That too. Despite everything, something that might have been a smile tugged at her mouth, died before it formed. I'm here on vacation, he said. Just a few days. That's nice. San Francisco. I'm still in San Francisco. Okay. What else was there to say? That she'd tried to tell him. That she'd called and texted and finally shown up at his office, only to be told she was lying. That the dates didn't work. That she needed to leave before he called security. That she'd spent the first 4 months of her pregnancy alone, terrified, working double shifts to save money because she knew she'd have to do this by herself. Ethan yawned. His tiny mouth opened wide, showing bare gums. Tim's expression shifted, softened, just for a second. He has your eyes, Kristen said. Quiet, not an accusation. Just a fact she'd been carrying alone for 6 months. Tim's jaw tightened. Kristen, I need to get back to my friend. She moved past him. His hand reached out, not touching, just hovering near her elbow. She kept walking. Didn't look back. Rachel was studying the menu when Kristen slid back into the booth. Everything okay? Fine. You sure? You look... I'm fine. From across the restaurant, she could feel Tim's eyes, watching, processing, probably already convincing himself he'd misunderstood, that the resemblance meant nothing, that his eyes weren't the same exact shade of blue as the baby she was holding. Ethan's hand closed around her finger, squeezed. The waiter appeared, asked about drinks. Kristen ordered water. Her phone sat face up on the table. The screen stayed dark. Tim didn't touch his food after that. The ribeye sat there cooling, fat congealing at the edges, while he stared at his phone like it might offer answers it didn't have. The waiter came by twice. Tim waved him off both times. Around him, the restaurant continued its expensive hum, conversations about deals and trips to Aspen and someone's terrible contractor. But all of it felt like it was happening behind glass. 6 months. He'd done the math 3 times already, kept coming back to the same number, the same window of time. That weekend in Santa Barbara, when he'd convinced himself he was taking a break from work, from the pressure, from the constant need to be on, when really he'd just been lonely in a way he didn't want to admit. The blue eyes, though, that's what kept circling back. He'd only seen the kid for maybe 2 minutes, but those eyes... His phone buzzed. A text from Reed, his business partner back in San Francisco, asking about some investor meeting next week. Tim typed out a response. Deleted it. Typed it again. The words looked wrong. Everything looked wrong. He left $300 on the table, way too much, but he couldn't be bothered to wait for change, and walked out into the Beverly Hills night. The valet brought his rental, a Tesla he'd picked specifically because it was quiet. He needed quiet, needed to think. But thinking just led him in circles. The 405 was a parking lot even at 9 p.m. Construction near the Getty, then some accident past Wilshire. Tim sat in traffic, the car's screen glowing with navigation updates he wasn't reading. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The leather was smooth, perfect. Nothing like the worn feeling of... He stopped that thought before it could finish. Back at the hotel, the Beverly Wilshire, because why not, he was on vacation. He sat on the edge of the bed, still in his suit. The room was too nice. Everything in it designed to make you feel like you'd made it. The sheets probably had a thread count higher than most people's rent. The minibar had champagne that cost more than a week's groceries. He thought about Kristen's borrowed dress, the way it pulled wrong across her shoulders, the exhaustion in her face that even the restaurant's flattering lighting couldn't hide. His phone sat on the nightstand. Dark, accusing. 2 years ago, when she'd shown up at his office, he'd been in the middle of closing a deal, millions on the line. She'd gotten past his assistant somehow, walked right into the conference room like she had every right to be there, hair tied back, no makeup. That look in her eyes that said she hadn't slept in days. "I'm pregnant," she'd said. "It's yours." The clients had gone silent. Tim had felt his face go hot, then cold. The humiliation of it. the assumption. The sheer audacity of thinking he'd just believe. He'd gotten security to escort her out, professional, calm, like she was a problem to be managed, not a person he'd spent 3 days with in a hotel room overlooking the ocean. Afterward, he'd convinced himself she was lying. Had to be. The timing was convenient, wasn't it? Right when his company started making real money. Right when he was featured in that Forbes article about 30 under 30 entrepreneurs to watch. Reed had agreed. Gold digger, he'd said. Classic move. Don't fall for it. Tim hadn't fallen for it. Except now. He stood, paced to the window, back to the bed. The room felt smaller every time he crossed it. Below on Wilshire headlights streamed past. Everyone going somewhere. Everyone with purpose. His laptop sat on the desk. He opened it, typed her name into Facebook before he could stop himself. Kristen Meester. Her profile was private, but the photo was public. Her in scrubs, hair pulled back, tired smile. The kind of smile that looked earned. Next to her, a woman he didn't recognize, also in scrubs. The caption said something about a double shift. He scrolled down. Nothing about a baby. Nothing about him. Nothing that suggested she'd been trying to reach out or get his attention or any of the things he'd told himself she was doing. Just a woman living her life. Apparently in West Hollywood, if the tagged locations were accurate. Working at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. He closed the laptop, opened it again. Typed Children's Hospital Los Angeles into Google, found the main number. Stared at it for 3 full minutes before closing the browser. What would he even say? Hey, sorry I called you a liar and had security throw you out, but I saw your kid and he has my eyes, so maybe we should talk. He was 35 years old, CEO of a company worth $40 million on paper. He'd negotiated deals with people who'd spent more years in business than he'd been alive. He talked his way into investments that other people said were impossible. He was good with words, good with reading situations, good with knowing exactly what to say to get what he wanted. But this, his phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus, then one from his assistant about tomorrow's schedule. He'd planned to visit some galleries, maybe drive up to Malibu, vacation things. He deleted both texts without responding. The hotel room was too quiet now. The hum of expensive air conditioning, the distant sound of someone's TV through the wall. The traffic below reduced to white noise. Tim changed into gym clothes and went down to the hotel fitness center. It was empty except for one guy on a treadmill, earbuds in, completely in his own world. Tim chose the rowing machine in the corner, started pulling, hard. The motion was rhythmic, mindless, something to do with his hands. 20 minutes in, he stopped. His arms burned. His shirt was soaked. None of it helped. Back in the room, he showered. The water pressure was perfect. The towels were soft. Everything about this place was designed to make you feel taken care of, but all he felt was hollow. He thought about calling his mother, dismissed it immediately. She'd have opinions, strong ones. His mother always had strong opinions about women and intentions, and the importance of being careful. He thought about calling Reed, but Reed would just reinforce what Tim had already told himself 2 years ago, and right now he wasn't sure he wanted that reinforcement. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling. There was a smoke detector up there, blinking its little red light every few seconds. Proof it was working, proof it would warn you if something was burning. The ceiling was smooth, no cracks, no water stains, no imperfections. Hotels were good at hiding imperfections. At 2 a.m. he gave up on sleep and opened his laptop again. He was supposed to have 3 more days here, a 5-day vacation, the first real break he'd taken in 2 years. He'd planned galleries, Malibu, maybe drive up to Santa Barbara. None of that mattered now. This time he didn't search for Kristen. He searched for Paternity Test California, found himself reading about court-ordered testing and voluntary testing and how long results took and what they cost. The information washed over him without really landing. Because that wasn't the real question, was it? The real question was whether he wanted to know, whether he was ready for his life to change in a way that couldn't be undone, whether he was capable of being what a kid needed. He thought about his own father, present but distant, successful but unavailable, the kind of parent who showed up to major events and missed everything in between. Tim had sworn he wouldn't be like that, had told himself that when he had kids, if he had kids, he'd do it right. But right assumed planning, assumed choice, assumed a timeline that made sense. Not this. Not a 6-month-old baby he hadn't known existed until 2 hours ago. His phone buzzed at 7 a.m. He hadn't slept, just lay there watching dawn creep across the hotel room, turning everything from blue to gray to the pale gold of early morning. The text was from his assistant, confirming tomorrow's flight back to San Francisco, asking if he needed anything else while he was in LA. Tim stared at the message. His finger hovered over the keyboard. Then he opened maps instead. Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, 4650 Sunset Boulevard, 12 minutes away. He could be there in 12 minutes. Could wait outside, could what? Ambush her? Corner her in a parking lot? Demand answers like he had any right to demand anything after the way he'd treated her. He set the phone down, picked it up again, typed out a message to Kristen. No idea how he even still had her number. He'd deleted it a year ago, or thought he had. But apparently his phone remembered even when he was trying to forget. "I'm in LA for a few more days. Can we talk?" He stared at the words. Deleted them, tried again. "I saw you last night. I think we should..." Deleted that too, about the baby. No, God no, that sounded even worse. He set the phone down, stood, went to the window. Wilshire was already filling with traffic. The morning rush starting early. Everyone heading somewhere, everyone with purpose. His phone was in his hand again without him remembering picking it up. This time he didn't overthink it. "It's Tim. Are you free for coffee?" He hit send before he could stop himself. The message showed delivered immediately. Then nothing. 1 minute, 2, 5. The 3 dots appeared. His stomach clenched. Then disappeared. 10 more minutes. Nothing. He sat on the edge of the bed. Phone in both hands now. Screen lighting up his face in the room's dim morning light. The dots appeared again. Why? That was it. 1 word. Not angry, not dismissive. Just careful. Tim typed, "I think you know why." Another long pause. Then, "Children's Hospital. There's a coffee shop across the street. 3 p.m. I'll be there." The dots started again. Stopped. Started. Then, "Don't make me regret this." He set the phone down. The sun was fully up now. The room bright and clean and still too perfect. He could hear someone in the hallway, a housekeeping cart rattling past, the elevator dinging somewhere down the hall. Tim looked at his hands. They were shaking. The cafe across from Children's Hospital was the kind of place that existed purely for function. Formica tables that had seen 1,000 coffee spills, chairs that didn't match, a menu board behind the counter with letters that kept falling off. Currently it advertised CFFE and sandwiches. The air smelled like burnt drip coffee and someone's microwaved burrito. Kristen was already there when Tim arrived at 2:58 p.m. Sitting in the back corner, hands wrapped around a paper cup. No Ethan. She'd left him with Rachel, called in that favor apparently. Her hair was pulled back, scrubs again. She looked like she'd come straight from a shift, looked like she hadn't slept. Tim ordered something, didn't register what, carried the cup to her table, sat down across from her. The chair scraped against linoleum. For a moment neither of them spoke. Outside, an ambulance pulled up to the hospital, lights flashing. No siren. Through the cafe's greasy window, Tim watched paramedics unload a gurney. Life and death happening 20 feet away while they sat in uncomfortable silence. "Thanks for coming," Tim said finally. "You asked." "I know, but I almost didn't." She looked at him directly. Those brown eyes that he'd forgotten were so dark. "I sat in my apartment for 20 minutes trying to figure out why I should give you more of my time. Came up empty. Came anyway." Tim set his cup down, hadn't touched it. "I deserve that. You deserve worse than that." "I know." Kristen leaned back. The chair creaked. Someone's phone was ringing at the counter. The barista ignored it. Let it ring and ring until it stopped. "So what do you want, Tim? What's this about?" "I want..." He stopped. Started again. "I saw him, Ethan. And I can't stop thinking about whether he's yours. No. I mean, yes, but..." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's more than that. I can't stop thinking about you, about what you went through, about how you called me a liar and had security escort me out." The words landed like a slap. Tim felt his face go hot. Yeah, he said quietly. About that. Kristen picked up her coffee, set it down without drinking. Her hands weren't quite steady. You want to know what that felt like? Standing in your fancy office with all those men in suits staring at me like I was trash. Having your assistant call security while you just sat there looking at me like I was trying to rob you. Kristen, I'm not done. Her voice was level, controlled, which somehow made it worse. I went home that day and I threw up. Not morning sickness, just shame, pure shame, because you made me feel like I was lying, like I was some kind of con artist. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, a tiny piece of me wondered if you were right, if maybe I'd gotten the dates wrong, if maybe I was crazy. Tim's throat was tight. I'm sorry. You're sorry, she laughed, no humor in it. Okay, great, you're sorry. I don't know what else to say. How about the truth? How about telling me why you didn't believe me? We spent 3 days together, Tim. 3 days. Was I so forgettable that you couldn't even remember when it was? You weren't forgettable. Then what? He looked at his hands, at the coffee he wasn't drinking, at anything but her face. I was scared. Of what? Of everything changing, of... He forced himself to look at her. My company was just starting to take off. We'd just closed our Series A. Forbes was doing a profile. Everything was finally working, and then you showed up and I panicked. So you called me a liar. So I called you a liar. He swallowed hard, and I convinced myself it was true, that you were trying to trap me, that the timing was too convenient. I had Reed telling me the same thing, had my lawyer saying I should document everything in case you tried to sue, and it was easier to believe them than to believe that we'd created a life. Yeah. Kristen was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the ambulance was leaving. No lights this time. Whatever emergency it was over. Or just beginning, depending on how you looked at it. I found out in a Target bathroom, she said suddenly. Tim looked up. I was on break. Grabbed a test from the pharmacy section, took it in the bathroom by the fitting rooms because I couldn't wait until I got home. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was a kid crying in the next stall. His mom was trying to calm him down, and I was staring at that little plus sign thinking my whole life just changed in a Target bathroom. Kristen, I called you first. Did you know that? Before I told anyone else, before my mom, before Rachel, I called you and you didn't answer, so I texted. No response. I waited 3 days and tried again. Nothing. Finally, I showed up at your office because I thought, I don't know. I thought if you could just see me, if we could just talk face to face. I remember. Do you remember what you said? After security took me downstairs, after I was standing on the street trying not to cry. Tim shook his head. Your assistant came down, said you wanted her to remind me that you'd taken precautions, and that if I pursued this further, you'd explore all legal options. Her hands were fists now. Legal options, like I was a threat, like my baby was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Jesus. Tim felt sick. I don't remember telling her to say that. Well, she did. And I went home and I cried for 3 hours, and then I got up the next morning and went to work, because I had bills to pay, and a baby coming, and apparently I was doing it alone. The cafe felt too small suddenly, too hot. The smell of burnt coffee was overwhelming. Tim wanted to leave, wanted to run, wanted to be anywhere but here listening to what he'd done laid out in careful, devastating detail. But he stayed, because running was what had caused this in the first place. Tell me, he said. Tell me everything. Tell me what I missed. Kristen studied him, looking for something. He didn't know if she found it. Why? She asked. What does it matter now? Because I need to know. Because you lived it alone, and that's unforgivable. But I want to know anyway. She was quiet for so long, he thought she might not answer. Might just stand up and walk out, and he'd deserve that too. Then she started talking. I worked until I was 8 months pregnant. Double shifts sometimes, saved every dollar I could because I knew maternity leave didn't pay enough. Threw up every morning for 4 months. Not just morning, all day. Lost 12 pounds before I started gaining any. Tim listened. Didn't interrupt. Slept on the couch for 3 months because lying flat made me feel like I was drowning. Had to pee every 20 minutes, couldn't fit into my scrubs, so I bought new ones a size up and then another size up. Got asked if I was having twins so many times I stopped counting. She paused, took a breath. Labor was 32 hours. Started at home thinking it was false labor. By the time I got to the hospital, I was already 7 centimeters. Rachel drove me, sat with me the whole time even though she was terrified of blood. Held my hand. Let me squeeze until I probably broke something. Where was your mom? Florida. She'd just moved. New boyfriend. She wanted to come, but I told her not to. Told her everything was fine, that Rachel was there, that I was fine. Were you? No. The word was flat, final. I was terrified and alone, and so angry at you I could taste it, but I couldn't think about that because I had to push, had to breathe, had to get this baby out. And then he was there, 7 pounds, 6 ounces, 20 inches, perfect. They put him on my chest and he looked at me with these blue eyes, your eyes, and I just... Her voice cracked. I fell apart, just completely fell apart, because he was perfect and he was mine and he was ours and you weren't there. Tim's eyes were burning. He blinked hard. The nurse asked about the father, for the birth certificate. I told her to put my name, just mine. She said I could leave it blank if I wanted, if the father was, if it was complicated. I almost did, but then I wrote your name anyway, because he deserved to know where he came from, even if you didn't want to be there. Kristen, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because you asked. Because if you're going to be in his life, you need to understand what it costs every single day. I understand. Do you? She leaned forward. Do you understand that I haven't slept more than 4 hours straight in 6 months? That my body still doesn't feel like mine? That I had to go back to work after 8 weeks because I couldn't afford more time off? That some days I'm so tired I can barely remember my own name, but I still have to show up because he needs me, and that's it. That's the deal. I want to help. I don't need your money. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Tim met her eyes, held them. I want to be there, not just financially. I want to learn how to be what he needs, what you both need. That's a nice thing to say. I mean it. People mean a lot of things until they don't. She picked up her coffee, finally took a sip, made a face. It had gone cold. You live in San Francisco. Your company's there. Your life is there. What happens when being here stops being convenient? When it interferes with some deal or some meeting? What happens then? I don't know, Tim said honestly, but I want to figure it out. What about a paternity test? The question hung there. Tim hadn't expected it. From her, anyway. Do you want one? He asked carefully. Do you? I asked you first. Kristen set her cup down. I know he's yours, I don't need a test to tell me that, but you might. And I'd rather do it now than have you disappear in 3 months, because you convinced yourself I was lying again. I won't do that. You don't know what you'll do. She wasn't angry, just matter of fact. Neither do I. So yes, let's do the test. Let's make it official. Let's remove any doubt so we can move forward. Tim nodded slowly. Okay. Okay. They sat there, the cafe continuing around them. Someone's order was up. The phone was ringing again. Life happening in small, mundane ways while they negotiated something massive. There's a doctor's appointment tomorrow, Kristen said finally. Just a regular checkup, shots, weight check. You can come if you want. We can do the test then. What time? 10, here at Children's. I'll be there. Don't... She stopped, started again. Don't say you'll be there if you won't. Don't make promises you can't keep. Not to him. I'll be there, Tim repeated. She studied his face, looking for cracks, for hesitation, for any sign that he'd disappear again. Whatever she saw, it was enough. Okay, she said, tomorrow 10 a.m., 3rd floor. She stood, gathered her purse, started to leave, then turned back. Tim. Yeah? I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm willing to see if you mean what you say. That's all I can offer right now. That's more than I deserve. Yeah. She almost smiled. It is. Then she was gone. Out the door. Across the street. Into the hospital where she worked. Where she'd brought their son into the world. Where she'd built a life without him. Tim sat there for another 20 minutes. His coffee had gone cold too. He didn't drink it. Just sat there in the cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and regret. His phone buzzed. Reed asking about tomorrow's conference call. Tim typed back, "Cancel it." Something came up. Again? Dude, what's going on? Tim stared at the message. At the question, he didn't know how to answer. Finally, he typed, "My son has a doctor's appointment. I need to be there." He hit send. The response came immediately. "Your what?" Tim turned his phone off. Put it in his pocket. Walked out into the afternoon sun. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., 3rd floor, he'd be there. Tim's flight back to San Francisco left in 6 hours. He'd packed that morning. Checked out of the Beverly, Wilshire. Returned the rental car. Done everything a person does when they're leaving. Except he hadn't left. He'd taken an Uber to a coffee shop in Silver Lake and had been sitting there for 2 hours, nursing the same cold brew. His phone kept lighting up. Reed asking about the investor deck. His assistant wondering about tomorrow's schedule. His mother asking if he was eating enough. He ignored all of them. The coffee shop smelled like burnt espresso. The chairs were uncomfortable on purpose. His laptop sat open, blank document, cursor blinking. He'd meant to work, but all he could think about was Ethan's tiny hand wrapped around his finger 3 days ago. His phone buzzed again. This time he picked it up. It was Kristen. "Ethan has a doctor's appointment tomorrow at 10, regular checkup. You can come if you want." Tim stared at the message, read it 3 times, typed, "I have to be back in SF," deleted it. Typed, "What time should I be there?" Sent it before he could overthink. Her response came fast, 9:45, Children's Hospital, 3rd floor, pediatrics. Then, "You don't have to." He typed, "I know." Then, "I want to." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then just okay. Tim closed his laptop, opened his airline's app, changed his flight to the next evening. The fee was ridiculous. He paid it without thinking. That would make it day 4 of his 5-day vacation. He could fly back on the last day as originally planned. Then he texted his assistant, "Push everything to Wednesday." Something came up. She responded immediately, "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just need another day." Which was a lie. Nothing was okay. Everything had been turned upside down and shaken hard, and he had no idea which way was up anymore. But something came up was easier than explaining that he'd discovered he might be a father, and was currently sitting in a hipster coffee shop, having what might generously be called an existential crisis. His phone buzzed. Reed this time. "Dude, where are you? Investors are asking about the Q2 projections." Tim typed back, "Send them the deck. You can handle it." "What the hell is going on?" Tim set the phone face down. Let it buzz 2 more times. Didn't look. He'd built his company from nothing. 70-hour weeks. Made Reed rich. Made their investors richer. But sitting here, all of that felt distant. Like someone else's life. At 4 p.m., he checked into a different hotel in Los Feliz. The room was basic. The air conditioning made a sound like someone clearing their throat. The bed was fine, the shower worked. That was fine, that was enough. He ordered Thai food from somewhere nearby. Pad see ew, that was too sweet. Ate it sitting on the bed watching a documentary about Theranos that he'd already seen. Elizabeth Holmes's voice droned on about changing the world. Tim barely heard it. At midnight, he was still awake. The room was dark except for the glow from the parking lot. Somewhere a car alarm kept going off, stopping, starting again. He thought about his father, about being 7 and waiting for him at a soccer game, the way he'd kept looking at the sideline, the way his mom had made excuses. "He's working, honey, it's important work." Everything had been important work. Birthdays, school plays, graduations. All of it less important than whatever deal his father was closing. Tim had sworn he wouldn't be like that. But here he was, 35 years old, successful by every metric that mattered to people who measured success, and completely unprepared for the thing that apparently mattered most. Sleep came in pieces. He'd drift off, then wake 20 minutes later, heart racing. The room was too warm, then too cold. The pillows were wrong, everything was wrong. At 7 a.m. he gave up and went for a run, down Los Feliz Boulevard toward Griffith Park. The morning was already warm, that dry Los Angeles heat. Tourists were taking pictures by the observatory gates, ran until his legs burned, until thinking became impossible. Back at the hotel, he showered, shaved, put on jeans and a button-down because he didn't know what you wore to a baby's doctor appointment, and his usual suits felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. By 9:30 he was parked across from Children's Hospital. His phone said 9:42. He got out of the car. The hospital entrance was automatic doors and cold air and the smell of antiseptic. The directory said pediatrics was on 3. Tim took the stairs, 3rd floor. The hallway was painted with murals of animals, happy elephants and deranged-looking dolphins. A kid was crying somewhere. A phone was ringing. Tim found the waiting area, saw Kristen immediately. She was in the corner, Ethan on her lap, reading him a book about trucks. Her hair was pulled back. She wore scrubs. Probably came straight from a shift. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes that made Tim's chest tighten. Ethan saw him first. Those blue eyes, Tim's eyes, tracked his movement. The baby's face lit up. Not recognition exactly, just interest. Kristen looked up. Their eyes met. "Hi," Tim said. "Hi." She shifted Ethan higher. "You came. I said I would. People say a lot of things." That landed like she meant it to. Tim sat in the chair next to her. Not too close, respectful distance. Ethan immediately reached for him, tiny hands grabbing air. "He does that with everyone," Kristen said quickly. "He's just friendly." But she shifted anyway. Let Tim move closer. Close enough that Ethan could grab his finger, that same grip, that same surprising strength. "Hey, buddy," Tim said softly. The baby grinned, all gums and drool. "The appointment's just a checkup," Kristen said. "Shots, weight check." "Okay." He hates the shots. Silence, not comfortable, not uncomfortable, just careful. A nurse appeared. "Ethan Meester." Kristen stood. Tim stood too. "You can wait here if you want," she said. "I want to come, if that's okay." She studied his face. "Okay." The exam room was small. Baby-scaled furniture and a changing table, posters about developmental milestones. The doctor was a woman in her 50s with grey hair and kind eyes, the kind of calm that came from seeing 10,000 babies. "And who's this?" she asked, looking at Tim. Kristen hesitated. "I'm Tim, He's Ethan's father," Kristen said. Flat, no emotion, just fact. The doctor's expression didn't change. "Nice to meet you, Tim." The appointment proceeded. Weight, height, head circumference. The doctor talked to Kristen about sleep schedules and solid foods and tummy time, asked questions Kristen answered with the kind of expertise that came from 6 months of daily practice. Tim just stood there, watching Kristen handle Ethan with that automatic competence. The way she knew exactly how to position him for weighing, the way she answered questions without having to think. 6 months of doing this alone. Then came the shots. Ethan screamed, not crying, full body screaming, that sound that makes every parent in a 3-block radius tense up. His face went red, his little fists clenched. He looked at Kristen like she'd betrayed him in the worst possible way. "I know, baby, I know," she murmured, scooping him up the second the nurse finished. She bounced him, shushed him. That automatic movement, that muscle memory of comfort. Tim stood frozen, wanting to help, having no idea how. "You can hold him if you want," Kristen said, without looking at him. "Sometimes a change helps." Tim moved forward. Kristen transferred the screaming bundle into his arms. Ethan was warm and solid and still absolutely furious about the injustice of vaccination. "Just support his head. Walk a little. He likes movement." Tim did what she said, walked in a small circle around the exam room, bounced gently, made shushing sounds that felt ridiculous but seemed to help. And slowly, gradually, Ethan's crying downshifted from screaming to whimpering to just occasional hiccups. The baby's head settled against Tim's shoulder, his breathing evened out, His little fingers found the collar of Tim's shirt and held on. Tim looked at Kristen. She was watching them, her expression unreadable. "He's exhausted," she said quietly. "The shots take it out of him." "Yeah, you're doing good." "I have no idea what I'm doing." "Nobody does. You figure it out." They stood there, Tim holding a baby he'd met less than a week ago, Kristen watching with tired eyes, the doctor finishing paperwork, politely pretending not to notice the complicated thing happening in her exam room. "We should go," Kristen said finally. "Let him sleep." Tim didn't want to hand Ethan back, but he did, carefully making sure to support the head. Outside in the hallway they stood awkwardly. Other parents moved past, kids running ahead, life continuing. "There's a park," Kristen said. "Near my apartment. We go there sometimes in the afternoon. If you wanted to, if you're still in town." "I'm in town," Tim said quickly. "What time?" "4? Weather's usually better then." "I'll be there." She gave him the address, Plummer Park, West Hollywood, not far. "Tim?" she said, then stopped, like she'd started something she didn't know how to finish. "Yeah?" "Don't make promises you can't keep, okay?" Not to him. She shifted Ethan against her shoulder. The baby was fully asleep now, mouth open. Completely trusting in a way that made Tim's chest tight. "I won't," Tim said. Meant it more than he'd meant anything in a long time. She nodded, started to walk away, then turned back. "And Tim, thank you for coming." Then she was gone. Down the hallway with the dolphin murals, through the double doors, out of sight. Tim stood there for a long moment. The hallway was bright with fluorescent lighting. A phone rang at the nurse's station. Someone's pager went off. Life continuing around him while something fundamental had shifted inside. He'd held his son, comforted him, felt that small body relax against his shoulder, trusting him completely, even though they barely knew each other. It was terrifying. It was the most important thing he'd ever done. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably Reed, probably his assistant, probably someone who wanted something from the version of Tim that existed 48 hours ago. He didn't check it. Plummer Park at 4 in the afternoon was full of life in that specific Los Angeles way, people from everywhere speaking every language, kids on the playground screaming in universal child, dog walkers navigating the narrow paths like they were herding cats. The grass was patchy in spots. The playground equipment looked like it had seen better decades. But the trees were old and thick, throwing shade that actually mattered. Tim got there early, sat on a bench near the swings, watched a grandmother push a toddler who kept demanding higher, abuela, higher, in that mix of English and Spanish. That was just how kids talked here. A group of men played chess at concrete tables, trash-talking in Russian. Someone's portable speaker was playing bachata too loud. His phone had been going off all day. Marcus called twice. His assistant sent 14 emails. His mother left a voicemail that started with Timothy in that tone that meant she knew something was up. He'd answered none of it. At 4:07, Kristen appeared. Ethan in a stroller that had seen some miles. She wore jeans and a t-shirt that probably used to be black but had faded to gray. Hair down this time, no makeup. She looked young, tired, real in a way that made his chest tight. "Sorry I'm late," she said, parking the stroller near the bench. "He needed a diaper change right as we were leaving, and then the bus was... Anyway, we're here." "I just got here," Tim lied. She smiled, just a little, like she knew but appreciated the lie anyway. Ethan was awake, chewing on a teething ring shaped like a giraffe. When he saw Tim, he kicked his legs, made that excited baby sound, reached. "He remembers you," Kristen said quietly. "Yeah?" "Yeah." Tim knelt next to the stroller. "Hey, buddy." Ethan grabbed his finger. That grip, that same surprising strength. They stayed there for a while, not talking, just being. Watching Ethan discover his own feet for the 100th time like it was the first, watching the park move around them. Life happening. "You want to walk?" Kristen asked finally. "Sure." She lifted Ethan out of the stroller, settling him on her hip. Tim pushed the empty stroller. They followed the path through the park, past the playground, past the community center, where someone was teaching salsa through open windows, past the old men still arguing over chess moves. "How long are you staying?" Kristen asked. "I don't know." She glanced at him. "But what about work?" "They'll survive without me for a few days." "Will they?" "Probably not, but that's kind of the point." They walked in silence. A sprinkler was running somewhere, that rhythmic tsk, tsk, tsk sound. The smell of cut grass and car exhaust, and someone grilling meat even though it was only 4 in the afternoon. "I thought about you," Kristen said suddenly, then stopped, like the words had escaped without permission. "Yeah?" "After, when I found out, I kept thinking about how to tell you, what to say, how to make you believe me." She shifted Ethan higher. "I practiced this whole speech, about dates and timelines and how I wasn't trying to trap you or ruin your life or whatever you thought I was doing." "Kristen, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I need you to know that I tried, that I really tried." "I know." "Do you?" Tim stopped walking. She stopped too, turned to face him. Ethan between them, oblivious, chewing on the giraffe. "I was an asshole," Tim said. Not just a little bit. I was cruel. I didn't believe you because believing you meant my life would change, and I wasn't ready for that, and so I made you the villain. I made it your fault. And that was—" He stopped, swallowed. "That was unforgivable." Kristen's eyes were bright, not crying, but close. "I don't need you to grovel," she said quietly. "I need you to show up, consistently, not just when it's convenient or when you're feeling guilty, because he doesn't understand convenience. He doesn't understand guilt. He just understands who's there and who's not." "I know. Do you? Because being a parent it's not visiting on weekends and sending checks and showing up for the cute stuff. It's 2 a.m. fevers. It's explosive diapers in the grocery store. It's being so tired you can't remember your own name, but you still have to get up because he needs you. And that's it. That's the deal." "I want to learn," Tim said. "I know I'm starting late. I know I fucked up. But I want to learn." She studied his face, looking for something. He hoped she found it. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay." They started walking again, slower this time, like neither of them was in a hurry to get anywhere else. "Tell me about him," Tim said. "About Ethan, what's he like?" Kristen's face softened. He's stubborn. Like, really stubborn. If he doesn't want something, you'll know. He makes this face." She scrunched up her nose, demonstrating. "But when he's happy, God, he's so happy. Everything is amazing to him. Lights, shadows, his own hands. It's like watching someone discover the world for the first time." "What else?" "He doesn't sleep through the night yet. Wakes up every 3 hours like clockwork. Hates having his diaper changed. Loves bath time. Makes this sound—" She paused. "You'll hear it. It's like a squeal. When he's excited. It's ridiculous and perfect." Tim listened, memorizing details, building a picture of this person he'd missed 6 months of. "He looks like you," Kristen said. "I know I said that already, but it's a lot sometimes, looking at him and seeing you. Especially those first few months when it was hard. I'd be up at 3 in the morning and he'd look at me with your eyes and I'd be so angry at you and so in love with him and it was—" She stopped, shook her head. "I'm sorry," Tim said, knowing it wasn't enough, saying it anyway. "I know." They'd circled back to their starting point. The bench, the playground, the grandmother and the kid were gone. The chess players were packing up. The sun was lower now, throwing long shadows across the patchy grass. Kristen sat on the bench. Tim sat next to her. Ethan was getting fussy, rubbing his eyes. That universal baby signal for "I'm tired, and the world is too much." "Here," Kristen said, handing Tim a bottle from the diaper bag. "You want to try?" Tim took it, took Ethan, positioned him the way Kristen showed him, bottle at the right angle. The baby latched on immediately. Drank with that focused intensity only babies have, like it was the most important thing in the world. "You're a natural," Kristen said softly. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "Nobody does. That's the secret. We're all just figuring it out." They sat there as Ethan finished the bottle, as the park emptied around them, as the light shifted from gold to amber to that particular purple-gray of LA dusk. "I need to get back," Kristen said finally. "He needs dinner and a bath and bed. Can I—" Tim stopped, started again. "Can I help?" She looked at him, really looked. "You want to come back to my apartment, help with bath time? Yeah, if that's okay. It's not glamorous. It's a cramped one-bedroom in a building with water pressure issues and neighbors who fight at midnight. I don't care about glamorous." She smiled, tired but real. "Okay. Yeah, okay." The apartment was exactly what she'd described. Third-floor walk-up on a street that needed repaving. The hallway smelled like someone's cooking, something with cumin and garlic. Her door stuck a little when she opened it. The apartment inside was small, but clean. Lived in. Baby stuff everywhere. A bouncer, toys, a changing table in what should have been a dining area. "Sorry about the mess," Kristen said automatically. "It's not messy. You're being nice. I'm being honest. Bath time was chaos. Ethan loved the water and hated getting out of it. Splashed so much that both Tim and Kristen ended up soaked. Laughed that baby laugh that sounded like pure joy. Tim helped without knowing what he was doing, just following Kristen's lead, learning through repetition. After, wrapped in a towel shaped like a duck, Ethan was calm, sleepy, the kind of peaceful that comes after a good cry and a warm bath. "You want to put him down?" Kristen asked. Tim carried Ethan to the crib in Kristen's room. It was shoved in the corner, just barely fitting. The walls were bare except for a calendar and a photo of Kristen's mom. Tim remembered her from that weekend in Santa Barbara. Briefly, he laid Ethan down carefully. The baby's eyes were already closing. Tim stood there, hand on the crib rail, watching him breathe. That small chest rising and falling. That impossible fragility and strength. "You okay?" Kristen's voice was soft behind him. "Yeah. They moved to the living room. Sat on her couch that had definitely seen previous owners. The TV was on mute. Playing some cooking show neither of them was watching. "Thank you," Tim said, "for letting me, for today, for all of this." "You're his father," Kristen said simply. "You should be here." "I want to be. Not just today. I want to figure this out, whatever this is. I want to be part of his life. Part of—" He stopped. "Part of what?" Tim looked at her. Really looked, at the exhaustion in her face and the strength in her eyes, and the way she'd built a life for their son without him. At the woman she was, not the memory he'd carried. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I want to find out." Kristen held his gaze. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but possibility. The beginning of something that might, eventually, become trust. "Stay," she said quietly. I mean on the couch, just in case he wakes up. Sometimes it helps, having someone else here, someone who can tag in when it gets to be too much." "Yeah, I'd like that." She found him a blanket, a pillow that smelled like lavender detergent. The couch was lumpy and too short for his frame, but he didn't care. "Good night," Kristen said from her doorway. "Good night." She paused. "Tim?" "Yeah, don't make me regret this." "I won't." She nodded, closed the door softly. Tim lay in the dark apartment, could hear traffic outside, someone's TV through the wall, the building settling, and somewhere just past that closed door his son sleeping. His phone was in his pocket. He pulled it out. 23 missed calls, 47 emails, 3 voicemails. He turned it off, put it on the coffee table, closed his eyes. For the first time in a week, sleep came easy. The apartment in No Valley had better water pressure. That was the first thing Kristen noticed when Tim showed her the place. Not the view of the city through bay windows. Not the bedroom big enough for Ethan's crib and their bed with actual space between them. Not even the kitchen with counters that didn't have water stains. The water pressure. She'd stood in the bathroom and turned on the shower and actually laughed. "That's what sold you?" Tim had asked, standing in the doorway with Ethan on his hip. The kid was 14 months now, walking like a drunk person, talking in that toddler way where Baba meant both bottle and bye-bye, depending on how urgently he said it. "You have no idea what it's like living with a showerhead that drips," Kristen had said. "I mean, I kind of do now." She turned off the water, looked at him. At their son grabbing his father's collar with sticky hands, they'd stopped for donuts on the way over, apparently. At this man who'd shown up to every doctor's appointment for 8 months, who'd learned to change diapers and make bottles, and read the same story about a caterpillar 17 times in a row without complaint. "Yeah," she'd said quietly, "you kind of do." That was 3 months ago. The move had been harder than either of them admitted. Kristen leaving LA, leaving her job at Children's Hospital, her co-workers who'd become friends, the city she'd lived in her whole life, starting over at UCSF Benioff in a city where she knew exactly 2 people, Tim and his business partner Reed, who still looked at her sometimes like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The apartment was full of their stuff now, but it didn't quite feel like theirs yet. Her nursing textbooks on the coffee table, his laptop perpetually open on the kitchen counter, Ethan's toys creating obstacle courses in every room. The couch was new but already had a stain from where Ethan had thrown a sippy cup of grape juice. The walls needed pictures. They kept saying they'd hang pictures. They hadn't hung pictures. Some mornings Kristen woke up and forgot where she was, reached for her phone to check the bus schedule to a hospital she didn't work at anymore. Felt the panic of, "I'm going to be late," before remembering she'd negotiated a later start time at UCSF, specifically because mornings with a toddler were chaos. Tim was good about it, asked how she was doing, meant it when he asked, but he didn't understand. Not really. He'd moved cities before, for college, for work. For him, San Francisco was just another chapter. For her, it was leaving behind every chapter she'd ever written. They'd fought about it last week. Not a big fight, not throwing things or slamming doors, just the exhausted kind of fight that happened when Ethan wouldn't sleep and the apartment was too warm, and Tim had mentioned, casually, like it was nothing, that Reed wanted him to fly to Singapore for the deal they'd been working on. 2 weeks, he'd said, maybe 3. Kristen had been trying to get Ethan into pajamas. The kid was squirming like his life depended on staying naked. "When?" "Next month. The timing's finally right. This deal could—" "You promised." Tim had gone quiet. That particular kind of quiet that meant he knew she was right, but didn't want to admit it yet. "I know," he'd said finally. "But this is different. This is important. I know. It's always important." She'd finally gotten Ethan's leg into the pajama bottoms. Small victories. "I gave up my entire life to be here, Tim, my job, my friends, my city. I did that because you said you wanted to be present, that you were done leaving. I'm not leaving, it's a business trip. For 3 weeks. 2. Maybe 3. You said maybe 3. He'd run his hand through his hair. That thing he did when he was frustrated but trying not to show it. "What do you want me to do? It's my company. I can't just—" "I'm not asking you to quit your job. I'm asking you to remember why we're here. Why I'm here." Ethan had started crying, overtired, over everything. Kristen had picked him up, bounced him automatically. Tim had reached out like he wanted to help, pulled back. Neither of them knowing how to bridge the gap that had opened up between them. They hadn't resolved it. Just put Ethan to bed and gone to sleep on opposite sides of the mattress, and woken up the next morning and kept going because that's what you did. You kept going. Now it was Saturday morning. Early. The city was still quiet in that way it only got before 7 a.m. Fog rolling in off the bay, making everything soft and grey and peaceful. Kristen stood at the kitchen window, coffee going cold in her hands. Behind her she could hear Tim in Ethan's room, that low voice reading a book, Ethan's giggle, the sound of small feet running, more giggling. "Daddy, catch!" A pause, then Tim's voice, "I'm gonna get you." Squealing, more running. A gentle thud as Ethan was caught and lifted, that particular shriek of joy that only toddlers can produce. Kristen smiled into her coffee. It wasn't perfect. Some days it was really, really hard. Some days she missed LA so much it physically hurt. Some days Tim worked until midnight and came to bed smelling like takeout and stress, and she wanted to scream that this wasn't what she'd signed up for. But then there were mornings like this. Ethan's laugh. Tim's voice doing the dinosaur impression he'd perfected over 8 months of bedtime stories. The smell of coffee and the fog outside, and the knowledge that they were trying, both of them, trying to build something that worked. "Mama!" Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, charging at her legs with the confidence of someone who'd only recently mastered walking and hadn't quite accepted that running was harder. Tim followed, hair sticking up, wearing the Stanford t-shirt he'd slept in. "Good morning, baby," Kristen said, scooping Ethan up. He was getting heavy. Soon she wouldn't be able to do this one-armed anymore. "We made pancakes," Tim announced. "You made pancakes?" "Okay, I burned pancakes, but we tried." Kristen looked past him into the kitchen, saw the evidence, batter on the counter, something smoking slightly in the pan, the fire alarm blinking like it was considering going off. "I can see that. In my defense, he was very distracting." Tim pointed at Ethan, who was now trying to put his entire fist in his mouth, kept demanding I do the dinosaur voice. "The dinosaur voice is very important." That's what I said. They stood there, their son between them, the morning light filtering through fog, the smell of burnt pancakes and coffee, and that particular scent that was just Ethan, baby shampoo and apple juice and something indefinably him. "I told Reed no," Tim said suddenly. Quiet. Kristen looked up. "The Singapore trip. I told him to send someone else." "Tim, I know what you're going to say, that it's my company, that this is a huge deal, that I'm going to regret it." He moved closer, not touching, just present. "But I've been thinking about what you said, about why you're here, about what I promised. You can't just, I'm not just anything. I'm choosing this." He gestured around the kitchen, the burnt pancakes, the coffee, their son with sticky hands and bedhead. "I'm choosing us." Kristen felt something tight in her chest loosen, just a little. "What did Reed say? That I'm making a mistake, that this could cost us the deal, that I'm being—" He stopped, smiled without humor. "He said a lot of things. And I told him to handle it. That's why we have 3 other partners. That's why I hired smart people." He finally closed the distance. His hand found hers. "I meant it, Kristen. When I said I was done leaving, I meant it." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But she'd been disappointed before, by him, by other people, by life in general. "Actions," she said quietly. "Not words. I need to see it." "I know." He squeezed her hand. "I'm going to show you." Ethan squirmed between them, demanding attention in the way toddlers did, loudly and with no concept of timing. They both laughed. Kristen set him down. He immediately ran toward the living room, probably to find whichever toy he'd decided was his favorite this week. "I'll make eggs," Kristen said. "You sure?" "I'm sure." They moved around each other in the kitchen, that choreography that was still being learned. Tim cracked eggs. Kristen found the good pan. He grabbed milk from the fridge. She added cheese. Ethan provided commentary from the living room, a constant stream of daddy and mama, and words they were pretty sure he was inventing. "Hey," Tim said after a minute. "Hey, I love you. You know that, right?" Kristen's hands stilled on the spatula. They'd said it before, a month ago, after a particularly good day at the park. Tim had said it first, casual, like he'd been saying it for years. She'd said it back, meant it, but it hadn't felt real yet, like they were trying on the words to see if they fit. This felt different. This felt like he was saying it in the hard moment, not the easy one. "I know," she said, turned to look at him. "I love you too, even when you burn pancakes. Especially when I burn pancakes. That's pushing it." He smiled, real this time, reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. His thumb brushed her cheek. "We're gonna be okay, right?" "Yeah." She leaned into his touch, just for a second. "Yeah, we're gonna be okay." And maybe they would be. Maybe some days would be harder than others. Maybe she'd still wake up missing LA. Maybe he'd still struggle with choosing family over work. Maybe they'd fight about stupid things and important things and all the things in between. But they were trying, and trying, she was learning, was sometimes enough. Later, after Ethan was down for his nap and the kitchen was cleaned, and they'd finally hung one picture. Just one. But it was a start. They sat on the couch with the grape juice stain. Tim's laptop was closed. Kristen's textbook was on the coffee table, unopened. His hand found hers, their fingers laced together. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For giving me a chance, for moving here. He gestured vaguely. "For not giving up on me." Kristen squeezed his hand. "Don't make me regret it. I won't." He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. "I promise." Promises, she'd learned, were just words. But actions were everything. She'd wait and see. But for now, in this moment, with her son sleeping, and the fog lifting outside and the man she was learning to trust sitting next to her, for now, this was enough. The end. Final message. Love isn't about perfect timing or perfect people or perfect circumstances. It's about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. It's about burning pancakes on Saturday mornings and fights that don't get resolved immediately, and learning to trust again when trust has been broken. It's about building a life together, piece by imperfect piece, and deciding that the work is worth it. Because some relationships aren't about finding someone who completes you. They're about finding someone who's willing to keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing you, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. What resonated most with you in this story? Was it Kristen's strength in doing it alone, Tim's journey to becoming present, or the messy reality of building trust after it's been broken? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Loved watching Tim learn what it means to show up. There are more stories like this waiting for you. Subscribe to the channel and like this video. Your support helps us bring you more emotional journeys worth listening to.